Welcome to the City Current Radio Show. I'm your host, Jeremy Park. We're always honored to bring you inspiring stories of individuals and organizations making a difference, empowering the good in our community. We're kicking it off talking about Men of Valor. We're joined by their program director, Curt Campbell. Curt, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Jeremy. Thanks for having me and for powering the good, man. We're thrilled to be part of City Current and what's happening there.
Hey, well, you are doing amazing good, that's for sure. So let's start with some history. It starts with a Vietnam veteran and really his ability to turn darkness into light. So tell the story of starting Men of Valor.
Yeah, so our founder was a guy named Carl Carlson, who was actually doing time here in a prison in Nashville in the 1970s. And he had come up the hard way. I mean, just kind of a tragic but classic story a lot of times for guys who end up in prison. He was left on the doorstep at an early age, never knew his parents, grew up in orphanages and state homes, started doing time when he was 10 years old, which just sounds crazy in today's world. But anyway, after a tour in Vietnam and discovering drugs, he came back, as he described himself, a wild man, and ended up serving a 15-year sentence for armed robbery. And during his stint out there at the Old Walls prison in Nashville, his brother, who of course had grown up just like he did, came to visit him one time and told him about this man named Jesus. And Carl said, "You know what, Philip?" He said, "You see those walls back there?" He said, "There's a lot of things going on back there, but God's not one of them." But it planted a seed, is what Carl always said. And a few months later, Carl found himself in some circumstances that brought him to his knees. And he cried out to God and said, "If you're real and you'll come into my life, I'll live for you the rest of it." And that's the short version. But that were the events that kind of led to him starting this prison ministry, Men of Valor, about 20 years later.
Kind of paint the picture, if you will, for recidivism rates across the U.S., because I think it'll paint the picture for what you're doing locally, both inside and outside the prison. So start with some context and then we'll dive into your program.
Yeah, Jeremy. So and some people may have heard the term recidivism but don't know what it means. It's basically defined as anyone who returns to prison within 3 years after being released is deemed to have recidivated. So in America, we've got about 2.5 million people locked up. 7 out of 10 of those people will return to prison within 3 years. I mean, that's a crazy statistic, right? Even when you're not putting dollar amounts to it. But just in Tennessee, it's $1 billion budget item, $1 billion, right, with a B. It's $30,000 plus a year to incarcerate a person. So when we think about it, matter of fact, I used to watch the news and I talk to people about this often. You see a guy who gets arrested for a crime, right? Whatever it is, a drug bust or a robbery or rape, whatever it is. And you kind of wipe your brow and go, whew, there's one less of those on the street. They're going to be locked up. We don't have to worry about them anymore. And that's just not reality, because 98% of those 2.5 million Americans locked up are coming out. So if people have not spent time in prison before, as one who's been there for the past 20 years, I can tell you they're not redeeming, happy places where people come out feeling like they've had a vacation. They are dark, desperate places. It's the enemy's playground. People come out hopeless to a world of a lot of burned bridges and a lot of rejection. And so they tend to return to the life that they knew and the people who will accept them. And so there's the revolving door, right? The cycle that continues.
So go ahead and start talking about the structure of the program, because it's both inside the prison and outside. You walk alongside for, a good amount of time, and it's hope, it's opportunities, it's community, relationship, faith. There's a lot of layers to this. So start unpacking.
Yeah, that's great. So we kind of view it as, particularly the in-prison piece, as we have a window of opportunity, as to your point, Jeremy, depending on how long a person's locked up, that gives us that amount of time to reach into their lives and impact them in a way that's going to make them a different member of society post-release. So, and you hit the other word on the head, is relationship. And that's really what we consider our ministry is. We are a relational discipleship ministry. So If you don't know that I care about you or am concerned about your well-being or whatever, you probably could care less about my opinion or anything I've got to offer. But if you and I develop a friendship and relationship, then over time, we can begin speaking into each other's lives. And so that's the hope of going inside of prisons, is that these men realize, hey, these guys are consistent. They're here every day or every week. They believe in me. They're trying to provide me with opportunities and, lessons of life, yada, yada, yada. So that's the inside piece. And then where we've learned the rubber really meets the road is when a guy's released. And this is part of the brokenness of our system. We're trying to get better, certainly as a state, but even nationally, where, historically, when a guy comes out of prison, he leaves with what he was arrested in terms of clothing, right? There's no financial compensation. There's no transportation. There's no housing. There's no employment. So you got a guy that's coming out with nothing and lost years to a society who, generally speaking, has seen the felony record as the scarlet letter. And it just comes with an immense amount of rejection. So we're trying to provide opportunities to really bridge that gap so that when a guy comes out of prison, he has a place to land in a community of people who are like-minded, who in our arena, it's faith-based, right? So this is a biblical manhood journey, but we're providing opportunities for guys to connect with each other, to learn their story, what we refer to as childhood wounds in a lot of cases, the early events of their life that have led them to anger and addiction and loneliness. And so we're trying to address the heart issues, the head issues, and then the plethora of just circumstantial things that are required for a successful reentry, right? Just things you and I take for granted, a valid ID, the ability to get from point A to point B, food and a place to lay my head at night, all that stuff that if somebody is not providing effective intervention, it's not happening. And so that's really where Men of Valor is. We're a stopgap, we're a connector, and we're a place that provides a guy to come and take a deep breath, to slowly start to get his feet back under him, and a place where, because of the incredible Nashville community, there's opportunity, right? So we have employers, some of them are connected with cityCURRENT, who invite our men to come work for them, knowing their history, but knowing what they're trying to do with their lives. So it's a beautiful community effort.
I think part of the magic, and you said it on the front end, was the fact that you go in and build the relationship inside the prison. So in other words, you're building the relationship there so that when they do come out with nothing, they know they have somewhere to turn with people who they already trust.
That's right.
So automatically it gives them a starting point where they feel secure and have the confidence to then take those next steps. And so share a little bit of just the success on this, because as you mentioned, nationwide, the recidivism rate is like 70%. But with what you're doing, it obviously is much, much lower. So talk about success on your end.
Yeah, so this isn't surprising, Jeremy, but the longer a guy stays with us, right, the greater his chances for success. We have structured our aftercare program as a 1-year discipleship program. So guys who stay with us for a full year or longer have less than a 10% recidivism rate for the history of Men of Valor. So that's crazy, right? I mean, just so guys don't go back, generally speaking. If a guy stays here 6 months, that rate goes to about 21%. But still, it's a third of the national average. So what we know is, and guys come here voluntarily, right? It's not mandated by the state. So they're choosing to come to a place where there's structure and accountability. And guys that come here and then are provided the opportunities to rebuild a life really can be successful. And I think that's the missing piece for a lot of us, is we just don't even believe that they can be something different. But God's telling a different story.
I think part of that too goes back to the relationship. You create accountability where these are people who are believing in you. You don't want to let them down. And so you don't want to turn back to that life that you knew before. Now you have a new hopeful future ahead, and you don't want to let those individuals down who are stepping in and pouring into you. So I think in a lot of, in a lot of ways, the relationship really is the magic ingredient of this. Carry that forward into a lesson or two that you've learned that you would put out there. So in other words, for all of us who want to make a difference and help and be on the solution side when it comes to working with those who have faced the darkness and are coming out and trying to get their life in order, I'm thinking things like grace and patience, obviously, are two big ones. But what's a tip or a bit of advice that you would put out there for all of us to be more intentional, to be a part of the solution for the work that you do in the community?
Yeah, boy, that's great. So, and I'll go back to the word we've used a lot as relationship. And that is, I've always said too, when I take somebody in prison, if we had everybody in plain clothes, you wouldn't know who the inmates are, right? I mean, we're all just people. We're the same. And then when you start to hear the stories of the men that we work with, you're not surprised they ended up where they were. And though they're tragic, they're not uncommon. And so just being, first of all, somebody's presence, their willingness to hear somebody's story is huge. And then just, again, the relationship piece. So one of the things we try to do is match our guys up with a mentor. That's a one-on-one person, just like you or me, who's going to just walk with them during a season of life. We try to get them involved in a church where they can start building other healthy relationships. We had a graduation last night for a guy, and 3 of the people who he works with, his employers, came to celebrate with him. His family was there. And so just what you were talking about, there's accountability in that, right? Like, what I'm doing with my life matters. People care whether I'm succeeding or not succeeding, and it's having an effect on them. So it's community, it's relationship. And so how do people like you and I participate in that? Well, when I learn that somebody has a felony record or that they've struggled with an addiction, I don't judge them immediately. I ask them about their story and tell me about your journey and what have you learned and how are you trying to move forward? And not just how are you trying to move forward, but how can I help you? Right? Is there somebody I could connect you with, or just being a part of their journey to success? None of us are self-made, right? We've all had people. Some of us are blessed with family members who've done that for us, others employers, friends, teachers, whatever. We can all be that for somebody else. So,
amen to that. So carry that forward into how can we help Men of Valor?
Yeah. So if you're prayer warriors, you can pray for us for sure. Spread the word. Just some of the things I've shared here statistically and just the realities of how incarceration impacts our society. Awareness is big. We are a nonprofit, so we require support. We have some foundational help. Most of our giving comes from individuals. If any people have employment opportunities for our men, we're trying to employ, over 100 guys a year in environments that understand who they are and what they're about and giving them an opportunity. So, and then there's all kinds of service opportunities out here at our campus. If people either wanted to volunteer to teach or be a mentor or just to come out to be an encourager or, share a story, whatever. They can visit our website, and that's probably going to be on this, but it's movnashville.com, and they can learn a lot about us on our website.
Yeah, and I think to your point, just one, knowing what you're doing and raising awareness, but then 2, coming out and being involved physically and just seeing it for yourself and just getting to know the men who you're working with and serving, that right there will open up your heart and open up opportunities and lead to good things. So once again, go ahead and mention the website and where we can go to learn more and raise our hand to be a part of the solution.
You bet. Well, it's Men of Valor, and so it's MOVNashville.com. And there's volunteer opportunities on there. There's lots of testimonial videos. Matter of fact, we talked about our founder. His testimony is on there prior to his passing in 2014. You can kind of hear his heart and vision for this. But yeah, we're always in need of volunteers and, of course, donors and employers. So if anybody that's listening has a heart to come alongside and co-labor with us, we'd love to have them.
Well, Curt, thank you for all you and your amazing team do. Greatly appreciate it. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks, Jeremy. Blessings to you, man.